At the will reading, my billionaire grandfather gave everyone fortunes. My father received $5 million, my mother $3 million, my brother Ethan $2 million, and me. Daniel Ross, the lawyer, glanced at the page, then said calmly, "For Hazel Carter, the sum of $50. Not 50,000, not a symbolic check." Just two crisp $25 bills slid across the polished table like a tip someone had forgotten to leave. Ethan burst out laughing. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "That's poetic," someone else snickered. I didn't look to see who. My father smiled, not cruelly, not blatantly, just with the quiet satisfaction of a man whose private opinion had just been validated in public. "It shows he knew who was practical and who wasn't," he said lightly. My mother didn't look at me at all. I sat there, hollow, heat rushing to my face and then draining away. I waited for an explanation, a letter, a final message, nothing, just Daniel's neutral voice, "Please sign here to acknowledge receipt." He pushed the two bills toward me. I picked them up. They felt heavier than paper should. The room buzzed with low conversation, the rustle of documents, the relieved murmur of people who had gotten what they came for. No one spoke to me. No one asked if I was all right. In this family, that question was only asked when the answer might be profitable. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't defend myself, I stared at the money. My grandfather had never been careless, not in business, not with people, and this felt intentional. I tilted the bills under the harsh overhead light. That's when I saw it, a tiny mark near the serial number on the first bill, almost invisible, a faint line that shouldn't have been there. On the second bill, there was another mark in a different place. A memory surfaced, my grandfather's voice low and amused. "If you really want to hide something important, put it where no one ever bothers to look." I folded the money, slid it into my purse, and stood. "I think we're done here," I said quietly. No one stopped me as I walked out. Ethan's laughter followed me into the hallway, but for the first time, something inside me wasn't shattering. It was paying attention. My name is Hazel, and I was never the one my family expected much from. Not because I failed at things, not because I was reckless, but because I was quiet. While Ethan learned early to fill a room, to talk loudly, take up space, and turn every conversation into an audition for something bigger, my instinct was always to watch. My parents called his ambition drive and potential. They called my stillness sweet and easy. "Hazel doesn't ask for much," my mother liked to say. What she meant was, Hazel doesn't make trouble. My grandfather, William, was the only one who seemed to notice the gap between those words. To everyone else, he was William Carter, billionaire. A man who had dragged an empire out of almost nothing. People straightened their backs when he walked into a room. Bankers laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. Politicians returned his calls within minutes. To me, he was just Grandpa Will, the man who drank his coffee black, who disliked pointless noise, who believed silence told you more about a person than a speech ever could. When his health started failing, the family suddenly remembered how busy they were. My father would show up in a tailored suit, glance at his watch, and say, "Dad, just checking in. I've got a meeting soon." My mother brought flowers that wilted untouched in a vase. Ethan came once, stood near the doorway like he was waiting for someone to call cut, clapped Grandpa lightly on the shoulder and said, "You're strong, you'll beat this." Then he was gone. Each visit left the room emptier than before. I stayed, not to earn anything, not to be remembered in a will. I stayed because someone had to. I adjusted his pillows when his breathing turned rough. Read the newspaper aloud when the print blurred for him. Listened to the same stories again and again without correcting him, even when I could recite the endings by heart. One afternoon, as weak sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, his hand groped for mine. His grip was frail but deliberate. "Hear that?" he asked. I listened. Machines hummed. Footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor. "Hear what?" I whispered. "The quiet," he said. "Most people can't stand it." He studied my face carefully, as if committing it to memory. "You're not one of them," he went on softly. "That's why you're still here." My throat tightened. "I'm scared," I admitted. He gave a faint smile. "You're not afraid of quiet," he said. "You're afraid of disappearing. That's different." I didn't know how to answer that. Another night, when the world outside felt distant and the machine's steady beeping was the only heartbeat in the room, he said, "People think money shows you who someone is." I gave a small, tired laugh. "Doesn't it?" "No," he murmured. "It just strips away their costume faster." I said he sounded like he was planning something. There was a flicker in his eyes, something sharp, intentional. "Maybe I am," he replied. I assumed it was the medication talking. I had no idea he was already deciding what I would have to become. When he died, it was quiet. No dramatic speeches or final phrases to puzzle over, just the slow loosening of his hand in mine, then nothing. Afterward, I stood there, frozen, with one thought echoing in my mind: now I really am alone. The one person who had seen me clearly without asking me to be louder or harder or different was gone. And I had no idea that even in death he wasn't finished. The funeral was exactly the way he would have arranged it: simple, precise, controlled. Black suits filled the small chapel. Polished shoes lined the aisle. White flowers were arranged so perfectly they didn't look real. Everything was tasteful, everything was expensive, none of it felt alive. I stayed near the back, hands locked together, unseen as usual. My father moved through the mourners with a composed, efficient sadness, shaking hands, nodding, murmuring the right phrases. My mother dabbed at her eyes at carefully chosen moments. Ethan accepted condolences like they were compliments being handed to him personally. No one came to stand beside me. Whispers drifted through the air, low but sharp. His real estate alone is worth a fortune. Ethan's probably set for life. How much do you think he left them? Each sentence landed like a small cut. I told myself to tune it out. Grief has a way of making every sound feel amplified, every glance heavier. At one point, my father's eyes met mine. For a second, I thought he might cross the room, say anything. He just gave me a brief nod and turned back to discussing logistics. The lawyer will call next week, he told someone. We'll handle the details. We, as though I were already counted out. At the cemetery, as the coffin sank into the ground, something inside me broke open. This was the end of the only relationship in my life that had never felt conditional. I wanted to scream. To demand that someone recognize how much this hurt. Instead, I did what I had always done best. I kept quiet. That evening, I was the one who went back to his house, not my parents, not Ethan, me. The place smelled of dust and old paper. I moved through the rooms slowly, touching familiar objects like they might vanish if I didn't anchor them. His watch on the dresser. The faded chair by the window where he liked to sit in the late afternoons. The desk with its scattered notebooks filled with tight, neat numbers. I sat in his chair and finally let myself cry. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to give the grief somewhere to go. A few days later, an envelope arrived, heavy paper, formal lettering. Reading of the last will and testament of William Carter. The date and address of a downtown law firm were circled in blue ink. I held the envelope in trembling hands. I didn't expect much. I'd spent my entire life training myself not to. Still, a small, dangerous thought slipped in before I could push it away. Maybe he remembered. I folded the letter and set it aside, not knowing that by the time I sat in that conference room, everything I believed about my place in the family would be dragged into the light. The law office felt cold, not in temperature but in temperament: dark wood, frosted glass, leather chairs arranged perfectly around a long table like the furniture itself understood hierarchy. I arrived early and, without thinking, took the seat farthest from the head of the table. My father walked in and sat at the head like he'd claimed a throne. My mother settled beside him, her mouth a tight line. Ethan strolled in last, already wearing a satisfied smile. No one greeted me. Daniel Ross, the lawyer, cleared his throat. We are here to read the last will and testament of William Carter. My heart pounded. I folded my hands in my lap and stared at them. Richard Carter, Daniel read. A total inheritance of $5 million. My father's shoulders eased. Brief satisfaction flickered across his face before he controlled it. Margaret Carter, my mother. $3 million, she inhaled sharply and reached for my father's hand. And Ethan Carter, Daniel continued, $2 million. Ethan's grin widened. He shot me a look, raised his brows and silently mouthed, "Told you." I reminded myself not to expect anything. I already knew how this story usually went. Daniel turned the page. And Hazel Carter, the room stilled. I could feel everyone's attention swing toward me. For Hazel Carter, the sum of $50. Silence. I thought I'd misheard. Surely he'd left something else, a note, an object, a reason. 50, Daniel repeated. Not 50,000. He reached into a folder, took out two $25 bills and set them in front of me. Ethan laughed first, sharp and delighted. "Wow," he said. "That's brutal," someone else chuckled under their breath. My father's lips curved in a small, satisfied smile. "It shows where his confidence really was," he remarked. He knew who would make good use of what they were given. My mother kept her gaze fixed on the table. I waited for something, anything to follow, but there was no letter, no explanation, no defense. Just two bills and a line in a document. "Sign here," Daniel said. My fingers closed around the money. It felt too heavy for its value. As the others flipped through their folders and began to talk softly among themselves, I tilted the bills under the overhead light again. The first mark I now saw clearly, a tiny, faint stroke near 3 digits in the serial number. On the second bill, 2 different digits were underlined so subtly they could have been smudges. Except they were, this was deliberate, precise, exactly like him. I slipped the money into my purse and stood. "I'm done," I said quietly. No one objected as I left. I didn't drive home. I sat in my car in the underground garage, engine off, air thick with oil and concrete dust. My reflection in the windshield looked pale but strangely focused. Most people, I thought, would crumple the bills and toss them, or shove them in a drawer and try to forget, but my grandfather had taught me better. "Details," he used to say, tapping his notebook. "That's where the truth hides." I pulled the money out again, smoothing each bill on my lap, 1 mark on the first bill, 2 on the second, different positions, specific digits. My pulse sped up. On one, 3 numbers were faintly underlined, on the other 2, together 5 digits. This wasn't wear and tear, this was a code. He did this. The thought hit me with a jolt, followed by a shiver I couldn't shake. William Carter despised loose ends. If he'd wanted to leave me nothing, he would simply have done that, cleanly. He wouldn't have bothered with $50, unless the money wasn't the point, unless it was a key. I drove across town with my hands clenched on the steering wheel, barely aware of traffic. An address rose in my mind without effort, the bank he'd used his entire life, the one he trusted when he trusted no one else. The lobby was calm when I stepped inside, marble floors, soft lighting. The faint smell of paper and polish, it felt like a place where secrets sank and stayed. I approached the front desk. "I need to speak with the branch manager," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It's about my grandfather, William Carter." The receptionist's face changed as soon as I said his name. "1 moment, please." Minutes later, I was led into a private office. The man behind the desk stood as I entered, gray hair, clear eyes, posture like someone used to making serious decisions. "I'm Mr. Thompson," he said. "Please have a seat." "How can I help you, Miss Carter?" I didn't waste words. I took out the bills and slid them across the desk. "These were left to me in my grandfather's will," I said. "I think he marked them, Mr." Thompson picked them up with the careful boredom of someone humoring a grieving relative. Then he went very, very still. His eyes narrowed. He turned the bills over, examined the serial numbers, then set them down slowly. When he looked up, the color had drained from his face. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice suddenly guarded. "You already know," I said quietly. "From William Carter." He watched me for a few seconds, then rose, walked to the door, and locked it with a soft click. When he sat back down, something new had entered his expression. "Respect. These markings," he said, "are not accidental." My breath caught. "What are they?" "A verification sequence," he answered. "And as far as I am aware, you are the only person who could have come here with them." I felt lightheaded. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, "your grandfather left an asset outside the will, something that was never intended to go through probate. Something only the holder of these notes could unlock." The room seemed to shrink around us. "And the money?" I asked. He glanced at the bills. "The cash itself," his voice dropped. "It's just the doorway." Before we went any further, he confirmed my identity. I handed over my ID with unsteady fingers. He studied it, typed into his computer, glanced at the screen, then nodded to himself. "Just as he said," he murmured. "As who said?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your grandfather." He crossed the room to a steel cabinet embedded in the wall. He used one key, then another, then a code. His movements were brisk but not casual. "There is a private safety deposit box here," he explained as he worked. "In William Carter's name only. It does not appear in the estate documents. By his instructions, we were not to disclose its existence to anyone, unless," I prompted, "unless they came with proof." He gestured faintly toward the marked bills. That sounded exactly like him. We walked down a quiet corridor that smelled faintly of cold air and metal. At the end, a heavy door waited. Mr. Thompson entered another code. The lock released with a soft, weighty sound. Inside was a narrow room lined with boxes. He unlocked one and slid it open. I was not prepared for what was inside. Neatly stacked gold bars caught the light, edges sharp and unmistakable. Folders labeled with company names I recognized instantly. Thick packets of investment documents, bonds, account statements. "This," I managed, "is approximately $32 million, Mr." Thompson finished calmly. Conservatively, my knees weakened. I covered my mouth with my hand, but it wasn't the wealth that undid me. It was the envelope resting on top of everything else. Plain cream paper, my name written in his familiar handwriting. "Hazel." My hands shook as I picked it up. He instructed us never to open that, Mr. Thompson said quietly. It's for you alone. We went back to his office. I sat down, took a breath that didn't quite reach my lungs, and opened it. The letter was neatly folded, the paper thick as though he'd taken his time with it. My dear Hazel, if you are reading this, it means you noticed what others did not. That alone tells me I wasn't wrong about you. Tears blurred the words. I blinked them away. I gave you $50 not because that is what you deserved, but because I needed you to see with your own eyes. Money does not change people, it simply removes the excuses faster. His voice seemed to fill the room. I wanted you to watch carefully, who laughed, who smiled, who said nothing when you were humiliated in front of them. Those reactions are worth more than anything they said over my coffin. My chest tightened. You were the only one who stayed when there was nothing to gain. You did not ask for anything. You did not perform, you did not barter your presence. That is why I trust you. My shoulders shook. I pressed the paper lightly against my chest. The money in this box is not a prize, it is a tool. Use it to protect yourself. Build a life in which your safety and dignity are not dependent on anyone's approval. And when they come, and they will, remember this, affection that depends on what you can give is not love. I wiped my eyes and read the final line, do not shrink yourself again. Grandpa's silence settled over us like something sacred. After a moment, Mr. Thompson cleared his throat gently. Your grandfather also left specific legal instructions, he said. If you wish, we can establish an anonymous, fully protected trust immediately. No one can access or control these assets without your explicit consent. Outside that office, my family was most likely celebrating, adding numbers, making plans. They thought the story had ended in that conference room, but as I folded the letter and put it carefully back into the envelope, I knew this was the beginning. The next time my family looked at me, they wouldn't be seeing the harmless one anymore. They didn't wait long. 3 days, that's all it took for the information to leak. During those 3 days, my phone buzzed constantly. Calls, texts, voicemails piling up. I ignored them all. By the third evening, the knocking started. Hard, impatient, like the door owed them something for making them wait, I checked the peephole. My father, my mother, Ethan. I took a slow breath and opened the door. We need to talk, my mother said, stepping past me before I could respond. They moved into my apartment like they owned the air inside it. My father's gaze swept across the small space, measuring everything. You've kept this place modest, he observed. Interesting choice. I stayed by the door. Why are you here? Ethan leaned against the counter, arms folded, a grin playing on his lips. We heard Grandpa didn't think you needed any upgrades, he drawled. My father didn't bother with pretense. We know about the account, he said. I held his gaze. What account? Don't, he snapped. Someone at the bank talked, 30+ million, Hazel. That's not something you forget to mention. My mother stepped closer, reaching for my arm. I moved just out of reach. This doesn't have to turn ugly, she said gently. We're family, Ethan laughed. Yeah, family, the same people you ghosted the second you hit the jackpot. Something in me settled, not angrily, but with a cold kind of clarity. At the will reading, I said, when everyone watched me being handed $50, did any of you say a word? They went still. Did anyone say it was wrong? I asked quietly. Unfair. Even strange, my father's expression hardened. That is not the point. It's exactly the point, I replied. Ethan rolled his eyes. Grandpa always favored you. Face it, this is just more of the same. My mother's eyes filled, her voice softening. Hazel, please, your brother has real plans, investments. This money could secure all of us. There it is, I said under my breath. My father's tone turned flat. We aren't asking, he said. We're telling you to do the right thing, split it 3 ways. Keep the peace, my hands were shaking, but I didn't tuck them away. The right thing, I repeated. According to who? According to blood, he said sharply. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. According to the law, I said, placing it on the table. This is entirely mine. They stared at it. What is that? Ethan demanded. My grandfather's additional instructions, I said, about the trust you didn't know existed. I opened the folder and slid a copy of the trust documents toward them. This account sits in a separate, anonymous structure, I went on. Outside the will, outside your reach, legally sound, fully protected. My father's jaw clenched. You coordinated this. No, I said. He did. My mother's voice was almost a whisper. Hazel, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I answered. I'm carrying out exactly what he asked me to do. Ethan's tone turned sharp. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. It just means I'm done acting smaller so you can feel bigger. My father straightened. If you refuse to share, we'll contest this, he said. All of it. You're welcome to try, I said calmly. But there's a clause in the will. Any legal challenge to its terms voids the challenger's inheritance. I watched the words land. That's not true, Ethan snapped. It was read out loud, I reminded him. You were there. My father's face darkened. My mother looked abruptly frightened, flicking her gaze between us. You wouldn't go that far, she whispered. I already have, I said quietly. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the distant hum of a car outside. Finally, my father turned toward the door. You'll regret this, he said. Maybe, I answered. They left. The door closed with a soft finality. The silence that followed didn't feel like an absence. It felt like a beginning. Their silence didn't end that night. It stretched. First the calls stopped, then the group chats. Invitations I'd never truly been wanted at before suddenly vanished, and their absence was somehow louder than their presence had ever been. I was quietly removed from the family calendar. Birthdays passed, holidays, no messages, no explanations, just quiet. I would be lying if I said it didn't sting. Some nights I sat on my couch, phone in hand, wondering if I'd overcorrected. If choosing myself had been too expensive. People like to talk about boundaries. They don't talk as much about the loneliness that can follow. My parents didn't call. Ethan blocked me on every social platform. I found out when I tried to check his profile and it no longer existed in my digital universe. I stared at the blank screen longer than made sense. So this was the price of saying no. I turned my attention inward, to work, to routine. To a life deliberately quiet on the surface, strong underneath, just like my grandfather had lived despite everything he owned. I didn't move to a bigger place. I didn't buy a new car. I didn't post anything that could invite questions. The money stayed where it was, guarded, invisible still, because money wasn't what I had ever really wanted. What I wanted was safety. Weeks later, I stood in a courthouse hallway, signing the final documents to solidify the trust. A separate attorney, a woman with calm eyes, went through every clause carefully. This structure gives you full control, she said. No one can gain access to it by marriage, family pressure, or legal intimidation unless you sign off personally. Control, consent, protection. The words settled over me like armor. My entire upbringing had been a study in pressure. This was the first time I felt truly insulated from it. Life didn't transform overnight. There was no montage. Just small, deliberate choices. A year later, on a rainy Tuesday, I held my daughter for the first time, Lily. She was tiny, reddish, furious at the light. When the nurse laid her in my arms, something fundamental inside me shifted into a new shape. Looking down at her, I made a promise I didn't say out loud. You will never have to earn love by disappearing. My parents didn't come to the hospital, they didn't send flowers, they didn't ask, and surprisingly, that absence didn't splinter me. Because as Lily's fingers wrapped around mine, as her warm weight settled against my chest, I understood something my grandfather had understood long before me. Family isn't defined by who appears when there's a fortune on the line. It's defined by who stays when there's nothing to gain. Sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and Lily's breathing was soft and steady beside me, I still wondered if the distance from my parents and brother was permanent. If the door I closed that day would ever open again. I didn't chase the answer. I'd learned that peace isn't found in fixing people who don't want to change. It's found in choosing a different future for yourself. There was no triumphant ending, no tearful reunion, no sudden, collective epiphany from my family. No scene where they apologized and I magnanimously forgave. What changed was subtle and safe. I moved carefully. I worked with advisors who only answered to me. The trust my grandfather had created became a barrier I didn't have to explain to anyone. For the first time, no one could guilt me with phrases like, "but we're family." No one could call my boundaries selfish and then use my guilt as leverage. No one could reduce me back to the quiet girl in the corner for their own comfort. I didn't feel powerful, I felt protected. As Lily grew, I tried to build a life the way my grandfather would have approved of, simple from the outside, structurally sound underneath. I invested cautiously. I arranged for her future education long before she could say the word school. I gave quietly to organizations that offered legal protection to women cornered by family pressure. Women who were told that's just how family is. I knew how dangerous that sentence could be. People sometimes ask carefully if I regret it, not sharing, walking away, being labeled cold. I don't. Regret blooms when you act against your own truth. For the first time in my life, I hadn't. My grandfather hadn't really left me $50. He hadn't even simply left me millions. He'd left me sight. He'd shown me who laughed when I was humiliated, who stayed silent, who only reached for me when there was something they wanted in my hands. And more importantly, he'd shown me who I was when I stopped begging to be seen. The final thing he gave me wasn't wealth, it was the courage to say no, the strength to stand alone. And the freedom to build a family that would never confuse control with love. When I watch Lily now, laughing loudly, taking up space without apology, I understand the real inheritance. Not money. Not revenge, not validation, peace. And that is worth more than every dollar he ever left behind.